Alright everyone, it's time for your daily white pill. The DA in San Francisco, Boudin there, I think it's Chesa Boudin, might be Chesa or something. I'm not going to bother about looking up the pronunciation. He's been booted. The San Francisco people overwhelmingly voting to recall their city's district attorney. This is great. San Francisco is one of the most far-left locations in the entire United States. Boudin, branded as a progressive, which means socialist. San Francisco adopted a broken windows policy. The policy was, hey, we're not going to care if you break out everyone's windows. Overrun with crime, especially property crime, soaring rates of violent crime as well. You got fucking homelessness everywhere. You've got drugs everywhere, people shitting in the streets. San Francisco is effectively a wreck. A city that 100 years ago was considered one of the most attractive in the world has effectively been destroyed by Boudin and other people. I will note that he is a Soros plant. He's been recalled. He's gone. Link in the description, archived, of course. It wasn't even close. It was beyond 60-40. That's called a shellacking within politics, generally speaking. This is San Francisco. After a couple of years, they recalled their DA because of the soft-on-crime policies making them miserable. If the people of San Francisco can vote to remove a leftoid from that position, they like the idea of defund the police and so forth. Until, of course, it came home to roost what those policies meant for their actual living community. If they can do it, trust me, other towns and cities across the United States can shoo the so-called progressives aside without any problem. Bernie Sanders is probably crying into his ice cream right now because of this. These are exactly the kind of soft-on-crime policies that the left wants to adopt nationwide. No guns for law-abiding gun owners, but if someone commits a crime, then unless they're literally on a shooting spree at this very moment, we're not going to respond. San Francisco effectively failed to respond to any minor crimes across the city, even though some of them aren't victimless. Now, I have no problem with ignoring drug laws. No problem whatsoever. Someone's on crack, but they're not bothering anyone else. They're just muttering to themselves in an alley. Just leave the crackhead alone. They're miserable enough as it is. They don't need to be taking up a jail cell. I don't give a shit. But when the crackhead goes and breaks out a window and starts looting the store to fund their crack habit, there is a violation of, there's an actual victim there. It goes beyond they're just an addict. They're just on crack and living under a bridge. No, they want that flat screen TV so they can buy more crack. San Francisco effectively made it outlawed for people, at least in commercial zones, businesses, to respond to this. Shoplifting was decriminalized, you'll remember, in San Francisco. I wonder why shoplifting became 10 times more prevalent in a city that already had high levels of property crime. And this is an extreme high-rent city. Look, when we look at San Francisco, we're looking at one of the most singularly expensive places in the world to actually live, and it's a goddamn dump. It's a complete fucking dump. Shit everywhere, addicts and homelessness and decrepit buildings. If you have a small business and you're in a city that won't even respond when someone's shoplifting and won't allow you to respond, you're not allowed to intervene in any way, shape, or form. They can walk up and down the aisles filling a cart, walk right out, come back and do it again. There will never be any charges brought against them. Boudin was instrumental in this by refusing effectively to police the actual law that had been passed by incarnations of government voted on by the people of San Francisco and California at large. What's happened there is an exercise, an experiment, if you will, in the failure of leftist policies with regards to property crime especially, and San Francisco is a great example of a failure of leftist economics as well. Hyper-regulation, enormous cost of living, enormous taxes, and the other problem is this. You've got a city with an already skyrocketed cost of living, to the point where people who would be considered upper middle class either don't live there or need to have 5 roommates in order to have a multi-bedroom apartment. Yes, people that would be considered solidly upper middle class, this person makes $100K a year, you think they got their own fucking apartment in San Francisco? Have you seen the prices? In the most rundown of neighborhoods, they'll be paying 2 or 3 times what they would be paying in a relatively nice neighborhood in most U.S. cities. They could buy a McMansion for that price in many parts of small-town America. Go down to Texas and see what the rent is. I guarantee it's not the same as Frisco. Hell, Austin's probably half the cost. And Austin's a lot nicer because, they actually there's an attempt made to, stamp out some forms of crime. This is a huge loss for the far left. AOC, Ilhan Omar, all of these types have openly proclaimed that this is the kind of policy, number one, that they want, and number two, they pretend it's the kind of policy the American people want. Well, if you can't get San Francisco to keep the progressive in his job, again, based largely on the denigration of everyone's living standards when they have to pay through the nose to live there at all, based on the soft-on-crime approach, when you have done the defund the police shuffle, and you've done the decriminalize actually not victimless crime shuffle, and they can't keep their job in a 60-40 recall that initially people were skeptical would ever take off, the left is lost. So stop being blackpilled. There's no unidirectional movement within U.S. politics. Fucking San Francisco just kicked out a so-called progressive. Again, literally just a socialist. The left has lost on another cultural issue. If you don't have San Francisco to back you on, if the Democrats of the left don't have San Francisco, they don't have anything. Maybe Portland. I guess Portland gives San Francisco at this point a run for its money. They've got nothing. Look forward to the midterm elections, dudes. I still see some cope posting from leftoids in the legacy media pretending the Democrats have a chance to retain the House in the upcoming midterms. I also see a lot of demoralization shills saying, well, it'll just be rigged, so don't bother voting. Yeah, that's a real good idea. It's not a self-fulfilling prophecy or anything like that. So be white-pilled. The leftoids lose again. They got absolutely curb-stomped. They got kicked in the cock and then their head shoved in a fucking toilet and swirled multiple times with a pile of orangutan shit. That's about all. Peace out.